today with another video. And if you haven't had the chance yet, please make sure you hit the subscribe button and like it. But today we're going to go over some layered stamping and just some fun masculine cards. I am surrounded by boys in my house, so I'm constantly getting tips on how to make cards appropriate for young teens and for adult men. So I hope I can share a little bit of that knowledge and a few tips on general card making with you today. And I hope you'll stick with me. All the links that I use will be listed below so you don't have to write anything down. When I start a project like this that I know I'm going to be mass producing some cards, I usually don't have a complete plan. So I start stamping lots of images and making backgrounds, and then it evolves over time. I don't know if anybody else is like that, but I kind of find inspiration in just getting the colors together and stamping the images and starting to come up with crazy fun designs. So for my boy cards, I'm going to be using navy and kind of a dark green. It's actually called Asparagus from Gina K's collection. And I'm trying to match my Altenew inks with this. So I'm going to be using Altenew's blue and green color families. The blue family is the one that starts with ocean waves. The nice thing about having stamp pads that are made for layered stamps is that you've already got your colors set. It's so nice. I would highly advise getting some of these, even if you get one or two colors, just so you can do images like this. It makes a huge difference and it looks amazing on these. So when I am layered stamping, a lot of times I do 2 layers of each color, but you can really switch up the colors by only doing 1 layer, and that's a fun way to change things up here. So on this one, I'm going to be doing my second or third layer, and you'll see over to the side I did one lighter just to kind of look and give you the contrast between using an outlined stamp. So this stamp that I'm using right now is outlined in black, but the one next to it is a second generation stamp where it's just barely there from the black, and it may be even hard to see on the screen, but it just gives it a different, softer look. I don't end up using that softer look because I feel like more defined edges is more of a masculine look. So it just did not look as masculine as I wanted these cards to look to use the softer image. When I am doing layered stamping, I always use my MISTI. I can do it other ways, but I really like to be able to look through that clear part above it and make sure everything's lined up. I also get down to the level of the stamp and check each side of the stamp, which is why you'll see my head in a lot of these shots because it's almost impossible to know for sure just from the top that you're lined up correctly. I like to make sure I'm not going over the edges, and that's why I look from the side. And sometimes you can notice just the slightest little off, and if you mess up 1 layer, I I'm too much of a perfectionist to not scratch that image if I mess up a layer. So anyway, this is a 3 layer stamp for the cupcake frosting. So we're going to do that final layer. You'll see I'm working on lining that up. And you can do, I could have stamped this same image in this exact spot and just traded out my paper because the MISTI is so helpful at making sure you line everything up. I don't tend to do that because I like to look at each one so carefully and make sure I'm lined up, but that is definitely an option if you're mass producing. One last thing about layered stamping that I wanted to point out is that these inks specifically, and most inks, look darker when you stamp them at first, but after they dry, they change color a little bit. So it is always good to have swatches of your colors. I swatch and put a dot of that color on the end of each of my ink pads, and I'm going to put up a video here that shows you how I organize them. But that always helps me to pick the appropriate colors, especially when you're trying to coordinate with some paper. It really helps. Another thing that I really like to do with layered stamps is switch up which stamp color of these pads I start with. So if you can see in these two, the bottom blues, I started with the lightest blue and medium blue on the left, and then I went medium blue and darkest blue on the right. So that just gives you a little bit of difference in your stamps, but still the colors will coordinate perfectly. So it's just another way to change it up. This stamp set only has one big image, and it's nice to be able to do it in coordinating but slightly different looks. This next image will show you what I'm talking about. Everything's slightly different about these, but they all coordinate together, which is really exciting. So in the theme of getting images ready, I decided to stamp a lot of images on vellum. Vellum is an easy way to put things over a busy background. So I wanted to have some gold images. My boys in the household are okay with some sparkle and shine, but they really like that to be pretty minimal. They love gold. It gives a nice shine, but it doesn't overwhelm and make the card feel too girly to them. So this is a good way to do this. I always prep the vellum very well with some powder. You saw me using my powder tool. I've even got it on my hands here, I think. But I cover the entire sheet because vellum, I feel like the embossing powder sticks to easier than even some of the papers. So I'm going to stamp with my Versamark ink, and I'm using this stampendable thing from LDRS to just hold that down, and I probably still will repeat it. You see, I shake my camera a little bit there by doing this so hard, but I just want to make sure I get a good image. And sometimes with um, that clear ink, it's hard to tell that you've got all of your details. So just make sure you look at it in different lights. You'll see me kind of flip it around and double check everything. I got this idea of using a coffee filter to dump this extra powder in from Jennifer McGuire. She's so good at coming up with ideas. I guess it's the engineer in her that help you just do things better. You want to put your embossing powder on while your paper's flat, and then you can put it, I always put the jar back in the coffee filter because then it catches a lot of it and there's just less dumping. I also always flick the back of my paper. I feel like this gets those extra little pieces that I don't want on there off of the paper really easily, especially if you've prepped it with powder. And then I go back and look at the image and look at every little detail and just make sure that I've got it covered. So once you start heating it, it's a lot harder to add and fill in any area. You need a very good heat tool. I like the heat tools that have a smaller end because I feel like I can focus that heat better. I'll link this one in the description below. And when you are doing vellum, you have to move fast and you need a very hot heat gun. So off camera here, I am holding this heat gun on and letting it get hot. And now that it is warm, I am starting to slowly go over this paper, and you'll see I want to keep moving. You don't want to warp your vellum, and it just lights up, shows that beautiful sparkle. So heat embossing on vellum is a great way to add some subtle shine and sparkle without overwhelming a masculine card. Now we're going to focus on inlaid die cutting. I wanted to show you how to do this because I love this technique, and I often forget to put some tape on the back to hold everything in place. So as soon as this came out of the die cut machine, I didn't take it out of the die, and I took some washi tape that I wasn't using very often and put it over all the little pieces to hold them in place. Then I usually apply glue over the tape and stick it to a plain piece of cardstock just to have some extra support, and also just to keep those pieces from moving because it has so many small pieces. You can easily lose one and then have to recut a whole nother panel to try to find it. I am famous for losing them on my desk, so this has really helped me keep it all together. You can see all those little bitty pieces and how nice it is to have that stuck down so you know they're not coming out. Recently invested in this large acrylic block, and I love it. It holds my paper down when I'm gluing something just to make sure I get all the edges. With the inlay die cutting, it is kind of like working a puzzle. I love using this tool from Studio Katia. It's got a wax end on one side which grabs pieces, and then you'll see me use its little pointy edge on the other. And what I do with the pointy edge is clean up any glue mistakes that I have. And it's a great tool for that. I think it's only like $10 too, so I'll make sure to link it below. But you see here, I'm just going to fill in part of this pattern. If I overdo my glue, I'm going to remove it with this tip from Studio Katia. I like using the Barely Art glue. It's a new one to me, but it comes with all of these tips. And so it's got this super fine tip that I feel like is the best fine tip for not clogging. I still take it off when I'm done using it and put its regular cap back on so that that's available. And sometimes I'll even rinse it out. But that seems much more feasible to me than sticking a pin down in the other glue. I just had so much trouble with sticking a straight pin in my glue. Either it gets stuck, it get warped, or it bend and not go back through it if the glue had dried some. So this stuff, if you're looking for a new glue, is definitely worth checking out. I'm going to speed up this process because I think it's just so cool to watch this come together in fast motion. I like checking it out. The little things that kind of crack you up and are exciting. So I'm going to use this base that's green here. I'll make a little platform to sit 3 cupcakes across. So I will show you how that looks in the final design in a couple of seconds. Here's the first one that I was working on. I used that green kind of like a little platform for those cupcakes. And then I did one on the white piece we were putting together. You'll see this, and just made a fun kind of geometric design on this one. Here's a close-up of the most intricate of those inlaid die cuts that I did, and we're going to work on the card that goes with this background next. For the next card, we're going to use Copics and coloring on vellum. So I'm going to show you how I did that. I put together kind of the base of this card so you could see. I think this might be my favorite one that I did. It's got a square of gold foil, and then I took a little bit of vellum and just kind of tucked it behind that frame with happy birthday on it. My tip number 3 for mail cards is to make sure the font is very masculine. So you'll notice that I try to keep it with kind of blocky letters. I've had complaints from my boys if I do a lot of scripty type things for boys. So just making sure to use that. That's just a little detail that I feel like makes a big difference in them feeling masculine or not. So with coloring on vellum, you always, especially with alcohol markers like Copics with this nice fine tip, you want to color on the back. And the reason is it does look a little streaky, and you'll think, oh, that's going to look bad from the front, but it doesn't. It looks perfect. So I picked Copic markers that I felt like matched my stamping colors, and I'm just going to add a little subtle detail to this. On this card, I also put the vellum on top of some white so you can see the color a little bit better. I felt like when I just stuck it on there plain vellum, it just didn't show up enough. And with this really busy background, it's nice to make sure you've got something that's making your image stand out. So I'm going to do some layered coloring. I've got the first layer down, and what I did is just used the stamps as reference. Where are my shadows going to be in this? And I really looked at those layering stamps and did my colors exactly the way that it does it on the layering stamps, because of course Altenew has perfected how these things should look layered. It's no need for me to try to figure out where I want my highlights to be when I've got it right in front of me. I do want to apologize for my hat being in the way. I had messy hair, and I figured at least if the hat was there, it wouldn't be showing all of that off in this video. So I'm going to finish this up fast, and then I'm going to show you what this vellum looks like straight on the card versus having a white background, so that you can see the difference that those two make and pick what seems best for your style. So here it is, just plain vellum. It looks good that way. I just really like it popped up on this white. I felt like that almost makes it glow from the inside. So I ended up doing it this way. Here's the close-up of that finished card. Just subtle shine. I love it. So next we're going to do something that looks like inlaid die cutting, but it's actually dry embossing with a plate. So I cut this out because I'm going to make a window card, and I just thought that plain navy didn't really look right. So I decided I would dry emboss this, and I went back and did it once with the cutout. So my sandwich here, I'm going to list up at the top, but this is what it looks like dry embossed. And you can see it stays together, so those little pieces aren't falling out like if you went all the way through it. And the final card I used here, I did some splatter on these, but I used it for both of these two cards. The last card in this set uses some of my scrap pieces. I learned about using your die plate as a stencil, and I just used scraps that I was going to be throwing away. I didn't recut this out or anything like that, and some Distress Oxide to make some really cool patterns on paper. So I did it on my craft cardstock for one of the cards, and then I'm going to show you how cool that looks using it on the green. I wanted to use gold again just to kind of bring that through. And I end up doing a gold of this stencil for the tag that goes around my packaging. So with the Altenew educators, we also make packaging for our card set. So I'm going to show some of that on this next little segment, but I'm also going to make a whole nother video on how to make the tassel that I used on this card. So when you see that on this packaging, here's the card with the blue, and then some scraps that I used to make my little tag set right here. So this green has that gold on it, and I made this tassel. So I'm going to show a whole nother video, and I'll pop it up here about how to make a tassel. You made it this far with me. I really appreciate it. I'm going to pop up some final pictures of the packaging and all the cards. And I am going to have some videos at the end of this. If you want to check out some more things on my channel, make sure you click through the links in the description below if you're interested in any of the products. Thanks, guys.